A young man collapses outside one of Hollywood's most exclusive nightclubs. Neon lights glow above him. Music is still playing inside. People rush forward, then freeze. Some recognize him instantly. Others only realize the truth when the sirens arrive. In a city built on image, fame, and illusion, this was the kind of scene no one expected to witness in public. Within hours, the headlines had their answer. A tragic overdose. Another gifted star gone too soon. Another warning story about youth, pressure, and self-destruction. Clean, simple, familiar. The kind of explanation people can accept quickly so they can move on. But stories like this are rarely that simple. Because when someone dies in front of witnesses, surrounded by people, why do so many details remain blurred? Why do accounts of the night feel incomplete? Why does the timeline seem clear from a distance, but uncertain the moment you look closer? And why, decades later, are people still asking the same questions?
The deeper you go, the stranger it becomes. A man known for sensitivity, discipline, and unusual self-awareness suddenly spirals into catastrophe in public. A final night described by many, yet fully explained by no one. A tragedy everyone remembers, but few truly understand. Maybe the world was given the ending before anyone understood the story. And that story begins with someone who seemed completely different from the Hollywood machine around him. Someone many believed was too real, too talented, and too rare to be destroyed by the same system that consumed so many others. His name was River Phoenix.
By the late 1980s and early 1990s, River Phoenix was more than a rising actor. He was seen as the future. While many young stars were packaged, polished, and carefully manufactured, River felt authentic. He had the looks Hollywood loved, but he also had something harder to fake: depth. On screen, he carried emotion beyond his age. Off screen, he seemed thoughtful, serious, and almost uncomfortable with celebrity itself. Audiences admired his performances, but they also admired what he appeared to represent. He spoke about animal rights, environmental issues, and living with purpose. He was known for rejecting parts of the Hollywood lifestyle that trapped others. In an industry obsessed with excess, River looked like restraint. In a world chasing attention, he often seemed quiet and reflective. That image made him different. It also made him trusted.
To many fans, River Phoenix wasn't just talented, he was safe. He looked like the rare young star who understood the dangers around him and would avoid them. Someone destined not just for fame, but for longevity. The kind of actor expected to grow into something even greater with time. And that is why what happened later shocked people so deeply. Because when someone fits the role of doomed celebrity, the ending feels tragically familiar. But River did not fit that role. He looked like the exception, the one who would make it through, the one who saw the trap before it closed. But public image can be powerful and dangerously incomplete. Because behind everything the world admired, there were pressures, contradictions, and warning signs most people never saw. And that's only part of the story. Long before that final night, there were signs that River Phoenix was carrying far more than the public understood. Success came early, but so did responsibility. While most teenagers were learning who they were, River was already helping support a family, working inside an industry that rewards talent quickly and drains it even faster. Fame gave him opportunity, but it also took away something basic: the freedom to grow in private. Every success raised expectations. Every performance created pressure for the next one. And for someone known to be deeply sensitive, that pressure likely landed harder than most people realized. River often appeared thoughtful and composed in interviews, but there were moments where another side showed through: fatigue, discomfort, even a sense that he saw the emptiness behind celebrity culture.
He was praised for being different from Hollywood, yet he still had to live inside Hollywood.
That contradiction matters, because rejecting the system is not the same as escaping it. Friends and observers reportedly noticed periods where he seemed exhausted, restless, or emotionally stretched thin. Nothing dramatic enough to become headlines, nothing obvious enough to change public opinion, but enough to suggest the polished image was incomplete. The world saw a gifted young actor in control of his future, but beneath that image may have been someone trying to carry talent, expectation, family duty, and inner conflict all at once. And burdens like that do not always break loudly. Sometimes they crack quietly, over time, behind the smile everyone trusts. By the early 1990s, River was still admired, still successful, still seen as the rare star who had avoided the usual traps. But appearances can be dangerously convincing, because sometimes the people who look most composed are fighting battles no one can see. And soon, the pressure around River Phoenix would begin to intensify in ways the public never fully understood. By the early 1990s, River Phoenix had reached the stage many actors spent a lifetime chasing. He had critical respect, major roles, industry attention, and a reputation that made him stand out from nearly everyone his age. But success can create a trap of its own. Once the world decides who you are, it becomes harder to be anything else. River was no longer just a young actor. He had become a symbol, serious talent, moral conscience, the thoughtful star who seemed above the chaos around him. And symbols carry weight that human beings often cannot. Expectations grew louder. Every project was measured against the last one. Every public appearance reinforced the image people wanted to believe. Meanwhile, Hollywood around him remained the same machine it had always been. Fast, seductive, relentless, full of temptation and people eager to benefit from proximity to fame. Reports from that period suggest River was dealing with increasing exhaustion and internal strain. He was still working, still visible, still admired, but maintaining an image while managing private pressure can become its own kind of collapse.
For someone already known to be intense and emotionally aware, the disconnect between public praise and private reality may have become harder to ignore. There is also the reality that youth does not protect anyone from burnout. In many cases, it hides it. A person can still look beautiful, successful, and promising while quietly coming apart underneath. That may be what made River's situation so difficult to read at the time. Nothing looked broken enough from the outside. But turning points rarely announce themselves. They arrive disguised as normal life. Another film, another night out, another appearance where everyone assumes everything is fine. Yet somewhere during this period, the balance seems to have shifted. The pressures were no longer background noise. They were becoming part of the story itself. And when pressure builds without release, it eventually finds a way out. For River Phoenix, that release would come in the most public and devastating way possible. Because the final chapter did not begin on the sidewalk outside a nightclub. It began much earlier, when the distance between who he was and who the world believed him to be started growing too wide to hold.
To understand what happened later, you have to look beyond the headlines and beyond the image people still remember. River Phoenix was admired for seeming grounded in an industry built on performance, but being admired for strength does not always mean you feel strong. In many cases, it means people stop asking if you are struggling at all. That may have been one of the deepest layers of his story. The more River became known as the thoughtful one, the serious one, the actor with principles, the less room there was for weakness, confusion, or collapse. He was expected to be different from everyone else, and expectations like that can become a prison. There was also the pace of his life. Acting careers at that level move fast. Travel, production schedules, interviews, public attention, constant judgment, little privacy. For many performers, the pressure comes from failure. For others, it comes from success. Success creates demand. Demand creates exhaustion. Exhaustion clouds judgment. And when someone is already emotionally intense, fatigue can magnify everything.
What looks manageable one month can feel unbearable the next. Then there is identity. River the public figure and River the private person may not have always matched. Audiences saw confidence and direction, but private reality is often less stable than public mythology. A person can know exactly what they stand for and still feel lost. They can be loved by millions and still feel alone. They can speak clearly about values while privately wrestling with habits, relationships, or emotional pain they cannot easily control. That contradiction is more common than people think, especially among young stars who are still becoming themselves while the world insists they are already fully formed.
Some who followed his life have suggested he was becoming increasingly worn down during this period. Not in one dramatic, obvious way, but in the slower way many people unravel. Restlessness, stress, overextension, the kind of decline that hides behind a smile and disappears the moment cameras turn on. There is no need to exaggerate it to understand it. Human beings can reach a breaking point quietly. And perhaps that is what makes River Phoenix's story so haunting. He did not fit the stereotype people expect. He did not look like someone on the edge. He looked like someone destined for greatness. But appearances can be misleading, especially when they are built under studio lights. By late 1993, the public still saw promise. They still saw beauty, talent, and future. But beneath that surface, there may have been mounting strain, personal battles, and a level of exhaustion invisible to almost everyone watching. The tragedy is not only that something went wrong, it is that so much may have been going wrong before anyone fully recognized it. And then came October 30th, 1993, a night that began like so many others, a night that would end by changing how the world remembered him forever. October 30th, 1993 did not arrive with any visible warning. There was no sign hanging over the city, no public clue that this would become one of Hollywood's most remembered nights. Los Angeles moved the way it always moved, loud, glamorous, restless. Inside that atmosphere, River Phoenix stepped into what appeared to be an ordinary evening. That is part of what makes the story so unsettling. Catastrophe often enters disguised as routine. The destination was the Viper Room, one of the most talked about clubs in the city at the time, associated with exclusivity, celebrity culture, and the nightlife orbit surrounding young stars. River arrived with people close to him, not as the center of a scandal, not as someone visibly spiraling in public, but as a familiar face in a familiar setting. To anyone watching casually, nothing about the scene demanded concern. But nights like this can change in small increments before they change all at once. Accounts from those who were there have varied over the years, yet many suggest River did not seem fully like himself as the night progressed. Some described shifts in energy or behavior. Others remembered a sense that something was off, though not necessarily dramatic enough to trigger alarm in the moment. That is often how danger works. It does not always announce itself clearly. Sometimes it appears as subtle unease that only becomes meaningful later. Inside a crowded room, details blur quickly. Music is loud, people are distracted, conversations overlap. Perception becomes unreliable. In that kind of environment, a person can begin slipping long before others understand what they are seeing. And once hindsight enters the story, every small moment starts to feel heavier than it did at the time. Somewhere during those hours, the tone of the night changed. Whether gradually or suddenly depends on which account you follow. But by the time River moved toward the exit, the ordinary version of the evening was already gone. What had been casual now carried tension. What had seemed harmless now felt unstable. This is where escalation becomes impossible to ignore, because whatever had been building inside did not stay contained there. It followed him outside. The crowd, the lights, the club, the city noise, all of it continued as normal for everyone else. But for River Phoenix, the final stage of the night was seconds away. And once he stepped onto that sidewalk,
the private unraveling of the evening would become public in the most shocking way possible.
When River Phoenix stepped outside the Viper Room, the story changed from rumor to tragedy in an instant. What had been hidden inside a crowded room was suddenly visible to everyone nearby. He collapsed on the sidewalk and began suffering severe convulsions. People rushed toward him. Others froze. Panic replaced confusion. In a city used to spectacle, this was no performance. It was real, immediate, and terrifying. Among the most remembered details of that night was the emergency call placed by Joaquin Phoenix, River's younger brother. The recording later became part of the public memory surrounding the event, not because it solved anything, but because it captured raw fear in real time. There was no polish, no Hollywood distance, only chaos and desperation. For many people, that moment made the tragedy feel even more devastating. The official cause of death was acute multiple drug intoxication. That explanation has been widely reported and accepted for years. But official answers do not always end public questions. In this case, they may have started new ones. Because while the cause identified what happened physically, it did not fully answer how the night unfolded moment by moment, or why so many details remained unclear. Even decades later, debate continues around the final hours, not necessarily because there is confirmed evidence of something darker, there is not, but because confusion leaves space for speculation. Witness accounts have differed, memories changed over time. Some details were emphasized, while others faded. That is common in traumatic events, especially those unfolding quickly in crowded public places. But it also means certainty becomes harder to maintain than headlines suggest. Questions still surface. Exactly when did River begin feeling unwell? Who noticed first? What was taken, and at what point in the evening? Could warning signs have been recognized earlier? Could anything have changed the outcome? Some of these questions may never have complete answers. And that may be the most controversial part of all. Not a hidden conspiracy, not a secret revelation, but the uncomfortable reality that one of Hollywood's most shocking losses happened in front of people, in public, and still remains emotionally unresolved. Sometimes controversy survives not because of proof, but because the final picture never feels fully finished. River Phoenix became a symbol of lost potential, but that night also became a symbol of something else: how quickly certainty can be built on top of confusion, and how long unanswered questions can live after the cameras move on. More than 3 decades have passed, and River Phoenix is still remembered in 2 different ways. One version is the public legend, the brilliant young actor, the rare talent, the face of a future that never arrived. The other version is the unfinished human story behind that legend, a young man carrying pressure, expectation, contradiction, and struggles most people never fully saw. Both versions are real. Neither one is complete on its own. That may be why his story continues to resonate. It is not only about fame or tragedy. It is about how easily people mistake image for truth. The world saw someone gifted, thoughtful, and seemingly above the damage that consumed so many others. But being admired does not make a person invincible. Being intelligent does not erase pain. Being loved by millions does not guarantee peace in private. River's death became a headline. His life became a symbol. Yet symbols often flatten the people they represent. They remove complexity. They turn living contradictions into simple narratives the public can absorb quickly. There is also the haunting question of what might have been. What roles would he have played? What kind of artist would he have become? How would age, experience, and time have changed him? Those questions remain powerful, precisely because they can never be answered. Maybe that is why the final night still draws so much attention. People are not only searching for facts, they are searching for meaning. They are trying to understand how someone who seemed destined for so much could be gone so suddenly. Maybe we know how River Phoenix died, but the truth of who he was, what he carried, and what really happened that night may always be more complicated than the story people were first given. If stories like this interest you, stories where fame, pressure, and reality collide behind the headlines, subscribe and stay with us for more deep documentaries. And tell us below, when you look back at River Phoenix's story, what do you think people still misunderstand the most?